Good morning.
Good morning, Mr. Howard. How are you?
I'm well.
Thank you. Um,
Are we waiting for my wife?
you both are on now, so I can
She's on?
put, yes, sir.
Wonderful. Is she opening up for us?
Let's see.
No, I was gonna let you open up for us.
Oh, no.
Come on camera.
Huh?
Come on camera.
Oh, I see. Well, I had a dickens of a time getting on because I didn't have the Zoom information. So,
I sent it to you.
yeah.
Good
Well,
morning, everyone.
okay.
Civics Education for Faith Leaders, Part 3. Those of you who missed Part 2, we're going to show you on the next slide. And I'm joined by Attorney Rodney Curtis Howard, and he is a very knowledgeable person. I am just his muse. Module 1, we did an overview of America's political system, talking about the structure of the federal, state, county, city governments, and to give you a sense of how legislation, public policy is shaped at every level of government. And then we talked about how the legislation last week that's being passed, how it impacts the church, things that you should know. And then module 3, we're going to talk about how the faith community can move to shape public policy. Next slide. I know you wonder, what do all these different colors mean? Well, I want you to look for your political address. All of us who are registered voters, all of you registered voters, you should know what, you live in the United States of America. So that's your federal address. But you also need to know who are your elected officials at the federal level and how they will impact the public policies for your community. So your political address includes your federal US representatives and your federal United States senators. You drop down to the state level, you live in a state legislative district. Mr. Howard can share that with you. But when you look at this, it says each governmental body affects housing. They affect transportation. That's what the little red bus on the slide means here. It affects faith institutions. It affects food services, grocery stores, and so much of our lives are impacted by legislation that happens at the state level. Here, there's the church, and how your communities are designed, how your zip codes are created. And so we're going to talk about your political address. You need to know who to contact at every level of government. You cannot just be ignorant. You should know who are my US senators. There are 2 for every state. And both of them represent you. They're not divided up. You have 1 congressman, US congressperson. You have 1 state senator and 1 state legislator. You have a county commissioner, and you have an alderman or a city council member, and you have a mayor. You have a governor, and you have president. Next slide. So these are things that your voter information, wherever you are in the United States, you need to know who these people are. You need to know what police district you're in. Now, sometimes we don't think about that. You need to know who represents your community on the school board. In Chicago, for the first time, we're going to have elected school board representatives. Most of you who live in the suburbs or other states, school board members are voted upon every year. Next slide. Okay, if you have any questions about voter registration, if you're not a citizen, you cannot register and vote in an election. Some states you cannot register and vote after you have, have been convicted of a felony or convicted of a crime. And so it varies state by state. Some states allow you to register and vote if you're in county jail and you have not been convicted. You're awaiting trial. You're waiting to be tried. So you're not guilty of anything. And they're now allowing you to vote, register and vote while you're sitting in county jail because you couldn't make bond. But that varies based on the state you live in. And I don't know the rules for every state. And there's a whole issue of how do homeless people vote? Because they have a right to vote. The issue is, what is your address, your mailing address? And so many homeless people will use a church as a mailing address, as their legal address, because they're moving from shelter to shelter. Next slide. And these are just some information on voter registration. And every state has different registration deadlines and so that you can vote in the upcoming election. And so you have to go to 1-800-OUR-VOTE if you want to know what the registration requirements are. Those are not questions that Howard and I can answer. It varies by state. And the reason it varies by state is because you have a state protected right to vote. States govern voter registration and elections. We do not have a federal protected right to vote. What happened to the meeting? Huh? What happened? Okay, next slide. And these are presidential primaries and caucuses. Mr. Howard, take it.
Well, clearly we are looking forward to this election season where we are about to elect a president. And before we get to the actual election in November, each political party has been moving to designate the person who will be the candidate for the position of president of the United States. And in some instances, we have people who are running without any party affiliation or attempting to. The purpose of a primary is a party election. And so you are expected to declare your membership or affiliation with a particular political party in order to vote in the primary election of that party to determine the candidate who will represent the party in the actual election in November. Now, in some places, the party has a convention. In some places, you have a caucus. In some states, to determine the delegates who will represent that particular state at the convention. So all of these are mechanisms by which the party can come together and designate the candidate that will represent them in the election. All of these things are, in one sense, party affiliated, but there are some rules and regulations so that persons are not excluded from the party necessarily. And much of that is involved and regulated by state statute. In Illinois, for example, political parties, the major political parties, both the Republicans and the Democrats, put in place certain requirements to establish yourself as a party, you had to have a certain number of signatures. If you were a member of a Democratic Party or the Republican Party, the number was substantially lower to establish that party as an instrument to designate candidates. If you were an independent, or if you had wanted to establish a new party, a Green Party, different other independent, they had to come up with 5 times the number of signatures just to put their candidates on the ballot. All of these things are, again, governed by state statute. So who are the legislators who are enacting these rules and regulations that govern the elections in each state? It's your state legislators, and you need to know who they are and what legislation they are enacting and the impact of that legislation.
And one of the things that, as you talk about these parties or caucuses, you notice that we have people that are running independent of the Democratic or the Republican Party. There's the Green Party, and then there are people that are running independently, like what's the guy that's running from the East Coast?
Robert Kennedy.
Robert Kennedy is running not as a Democrat, not as a Republican. And you also have one of our stalwart.
Cornel West.
Yes, Cornel West is running, not as a Democrat, not as a Republican. And so you will see their names on the ballot if they qualify based on what the state requirements are to get on the ballot. And some of the states are requiring a certain amount of money, certain amount of signatures, voters in that state. So all of those things have to be considered, and pastors and churches can get involved in understanding and sharing this kind of information, particularly if your state like Iowa is a caucus state. We went to caucuses when Reverend Jackson ran for president. So you meet in individuals' homes who host these caucus meetings to discuss which person you are going to support for the office. And that's a whole interesting process. You know, it's a bunch of strange people sitting in a room in somebody's house, literally. Next slide.
Yeah, ultimately they determine who are going to be the delegates that will go forward representing that state in the conventions if they're a member of a major party,
Republican or Democratic Party. Okay, elections, midterm elections. And this is very important. Oftentimes we sleep these midterm elections because United States House of Representatives run every 2 years. The US senators have staggered elections, and the control of the House and the Senate are very important. Which party controls them will determine how they will move legislation forward or hold it up. We've seen the tension between the Democrats and the Republicans in this last year, as a matter of fact, passing a balanced budget, voting on appropriations for various things, healthcare, education, determining legislation as it relates to what is happening here.
Immigration.
Yeah.
So you have all of these issues that are essential, and because the House of Representatives, each congressperson is elected for only a 2-year term, the control of the House of Representatives can change after each 2-year election. That's the midterm election between the presidential elections. And so when you have as we have currently, the House of Representatives being controlled by the Republican Party, even though it's only a small margin, much of the legislation that has to be or is promoted by the chief executive, the president, can't get passed because the opposition party doesn't want that legislation to get passed, not because it's going to benefit the nation, but because they feel that they will be able to recapture control of the executive branch at the next presidential election. So that's what we've had. We've had a Congress that has been stalling on much of the legislation so that they can hope that their candidate will retake the presidency at the next presidential election in November.
This is why it is incumbent upon faith leaders to be pushing and urging people to register and vote and tell them why they must vote for Congress. Oftentimes, even in this presidential election season, we have to focus on the House and the Senate because the balance of power is being shaped by who's in the House of Representatives and who's in the United States Senate. U.S. senators appoint federal judges. They appoint judges to the Supreme Court, which will determine what happens when cases are appealed. That's how they overturned Roe versus Wade, merely because Trump was able to appoint judges that did not believe in abortion, did not believe in a woman's right to choose, and they were able to just vote and overturn a case that had been for years.
50 years.
Standing. So then you have, and when you look at the House of Representatives and you look at Medicare, Medicaid, Affordable Care Act, a lot of legislation was not pushed through. Ban on assault weapons. That comes out of the House, then it goes to the Senate. House has held up all kinds of legislation.
Immigration.
Immigration is a big deal. And so what you have in terms of balancing the power, the president has executive powers, and so that's why he issues executive orders. But the executive orders last so long as the president is the president, and he's limited in the extent of the executive order. Next slide. And then local government leaders. These are the people at the city, county, state level. You're gonna know them before you know a lot of other people. You should know who is your alderman, your city council member. They are passing legislation that impacts you every day, every single day. When they had a council meetings that we're too tired to go to, even though you're retired, and pastors, you have a lot of freedom that you're not looking to impact. You should be at city council meetings only once a month. So you should, or at least talk to your alderman, have your alderman or council member come to your church and report on what he or she is doing, what's happening.
Before election time.
Yeah, running at election time, vote for me. What have you done the last 4 years? And then in Chicago, they run on the off year, odd year. They don't run, aldermen are not running on the presidential year. They run the next year. But you should know, what legislation are you all introducing? What's happening? What are you all voting on? What are y'all sitting down there doing? And same thing with the state senators, state representatives. They are passing laws every day. Well, not every day, but they're passing laws that impact you. If you want to change how the zoning affects you, that's a city council, that's a county board. If you want to change how your parks function, that's city council. If you want to change the forest preserves and what rules they have, that's your county commissioners. Raise those questions with them. It's not just talk to your alderman or council member about picking up your garbage. What kind of taxes are you paying alley taxes, refuse taxes, removal taxes, lights in the alleys and on your street, those kind of things.
Well, you also have the situation that's set, especially at the state level. The state legislature is passing laws affecting your right to vote. As we saw in Georgia, they eliminated certain rights to people to even pass a bottle of water to people standing in line to vote, because the state legislature determined that regulation. We have to be careful to monitor what our state representatives, our state legislators are doing in the state capitol. What legislation are they promoting? What legislation are they contemplating? Because in many instances, they pass these things before we find out about them. That is why we need to be demanding that our state legislators come and report to us on a regular basis as to what bills are being contemplated, what legislation they're trying to get passed, and get our input. Some of the things that they are contemplating are strictly for their own political purposes and have nothing to do with the betterment of the state or the citizens in the state.
So one of the things that faith leaders should consider is a lobby day. Go to Springfield if you're in Illinois. Go to your state capital, which you should know where it is, wherever you are. There's a state capital. That's where the state houses meet, just like you have a federal Congress and Senate. You have in the state, you have a state legislative bodies meet, and they have a state capital. That's where you go. That's where Dr. King marched from Selma to Montgomery, which was the state capital for Alabama. And that's why he marched for voting rights from Selma to Montgomery. And that was led by faith leaders. And so some things, like y'all be sitting at home complaining about the migrants and the immigrants, you have no legislation that says what should happen, or you may not know what it is at your state level, at your county level, at your city level. What should happen? How do we treat homeless? What are the rules that govern homeless shelters and how they exist or shouldn't exist? Some of you complain every day because you're paying taxes, city tax on going to the grocery store. If you're in Chicago, you pay more than you pay in the suburbs. Well, you could change that. Go down to that city council, say, we're tired of paying for bags. We don't want to pay for this. Tell your elected representatives what you want changed. Some places, churches are exempt from water bills. Other places, they're not. That's because some people decide to fight for the church. Next slide. And so these are some of the positions that we vote for locally. You got circuit court judges. You vote for school board. You vote for state comptroller, city comptroller, county comptroller, in some places. Public water commissioner, public works commissioner. We vote for Metropolitan Water Reclamation District. That's the district that manages water, our purification system. We have some commissioners that are paid great salaries to monitor our water and build suburban cities for the water they use. You vote for county commissioners, you vote for mayor, you vote for city council or alderman. You vote for board of supervisors in some places. Vote for county sheriffs across the country. You vote for a county prosecutor. And some places you vote for coroner or medical examiner. Next slide. So this is what local government leaders do. They set policy, and you may or may not agree with it. They propose budgets and approve budgets. for the city, the county, and the state. They, the city council or the county board approve budgets and contracts. State General Assembly approves certain contracts and appropriation of funds to different state agencies, like education, like commerce, and some of the other 40 boards and commissions that exist, at least in Illinois. And then all of them have emergency powers if there's a storm or attack that they can deal with. Next slide. And this is where every faith leader, you should know how many boards and commissions are in your city, your county, and your state. They are appointed by the executive officer, whether it's the mayor, county board president, or the governor. Each of those entities have boards and commissions. Now, the federal government also has what they call the plum book. The president appoints cabinet members. 10 or 12 cabinet members? Secretary of Education, Secretary of Commerce, Secretary of Transportation, Secretary of Health, Secretary of the Treasury, and so forth and so on. You have that at the state level, you have it at the county level, and you have it at the city level. And this is some of the commissions at the city level that are appointed by the mayor. And so when you elect a mayor, you're electing somebody that has this kind of power. Some of these boards and commissions are paid positions, and some are voluntary. So if I were pastoring or leading a faith group, I would want to know who are these people on each one of these boards and commissions, particularly economic development, Cook County zoning, because zoning affects how your church functions, employee appeals board for county, Illinois Department of Labor, the Justice Advisory Council. Those are some things that I would think about. Medical examiners, you need to know how they function, because you may have members who are involved in a crime or die, and they have been labeled and designated unknown. You need to have a relationship with somebody that can tell you how that process works. Next slide.
You might also want to look at law enforcement oversight, especially police oversight. Usually you have a civilian oversight group that is appointed by the mayor. And that's one that can lead to just the point where the citizens are up in arms about some police shooting or something that took place. You want to make sure that you have the right people on the oversight board for that, to make sure that the transparency that is necessary to resolve those kinds of situations is there. Many times we don't find out about what has taken place for years after the incident. And then when we find out, we are upset, because the people that are on the police oversight commissions and boards don't take the time to share that with the community.
Well, and the other thing, we get back in our community a lot of returning offenders, returning citizens, they call them. And some people are sitting in jail and being denied parole routinely, because the parole board, there are very few faith leaders on the parole board. We never even asked to be on it. And yet we're the ones that they return to our congregations. And so these are boards that CTA, RTA, if you're in Illinois, we should be on transportation board. We should be on now we have all this technology, the cable commission. he should be able to direct what is aired on cable, how these cable companies reinvest money that they take out of the community back in the community. Somebody should be looking at all of these restaurants that exist in our cities and towns. What do they do to reinvest dollars they take out of our neighborhoods back in the neighborhoods? You want to have somebody you know on the park districts and the what's that place? Not the parks, but the forest preserves. They got people that they pay on the forest preserve, give them a free house to maintain the grounds of the forest preserve. They're not doing the maintenance, they're just sitting there. So these are things you should be asking your city council member, your mayor, wherever you are, your county board commissioner. And this is how actions at a local government. Brother Howard?
Well, of course, your state legislature and your city legislators, be they the city council or the city managers, they enact ordinances. And these ordinances are local laws. And they have penalties for the breach of those local laws. Primarily, we get involved and get upset about traffic laws, traffic regulations. But there are so many other local ordinances that are impacting us. The city building code, for example, when you get ready to modify or erect a particular structure, you have to go through the process of getting the necessary permits. All those things are governed by the local legislature. And that legislature is comprised of the aldermen or city representatives that you have elected. You ought to be able to have some communication and contact with them because most of us as citizens don't get involved in city planning. We don't have the long-term plan that has been put in place in terms of the development of our city or neighborhoods. And we find things being erected or established in our neighborhoods that we may have some objection to or want to have modified to incorporate more of the community, but because we're not involved with that process, we don't understand it or get involved in it until the thing has already been established and completed. So we need to get involved with that. Certainly there are resolutions that are usually issued by the chief executive, whoever that might be, the mayor, the city, whatever chief city manager you have, chairman of the city board, whatever. These resolutions usually are specific to a particular situation, but they may go into effect immediately. They may have a time frame before they are to be implemented. If it's going to impact your neighborhood, if it's going to impact your particular facility, your church, whatever, your community center, you want to have knowledge of that before the resolution is passed, so that if, in fact, it's going to impact you, you can give your input into that. Certainly, there are some motions made on behalf of particular legislation, and we always have these proclamations that are issued, usually on behalf of some outstanding citizen, some hero who has performed a heroic act, or in many instances, especially in Chicago, they declare this is the 100th anniversary of the church, and we want to proclaim its St. Augustine Day or whatever. Part of our problem is that we don't really get involved and take our governmental action seriously enough because we're so involved in our day-to-day struggles in life. And it's unfortunate, but we are really shortchanging ourselves as citizens when we don't get involved politically.
And I think that's where faith leaders can have a committee at your congregation, your faith institution that looks at the city, the county, the state, and federal. That may be 6 people, and they will bring reports back and invite your elected officials, not while they're running, to come and tell you what they are doing. There are some ordinances that you should maybe want to consider. In Chicago, one of the aldermen just introduced where children can't be downtown in Streeterville after a certain time. But
8 o'clock.
8 o'clock. Well, why are we letting them shoot up our neighborhoods and not say, parents, your child needs to be at home? I'm not picking the time, but there has to be some rules that apply broadly to the neighborhoods where most of the, I can tell you 12 communities in Chicago where most of the violence occurs. When I turn on the news, I already know where it happened. It's one of these 12 places where the violence automatically happens. And we are saying absolutely nothing. They can never find the shooter. They can never find the killer. Just like we saw where some kids were stealing in a jewelry store, and then some were stealing Legos from a Legos place. And he rode away on a bike. I mean, no, they shot somebody shot somebody and left at the beach and left on a bike. So we have to begin to look at what kind of legislation do we want that protects our neighborhoods. In some communities, certain things won't happen because they're going to deal with it like right then, not going to happen next year. We're dealing with this today. Next slide. And these are some types of ordinances that people have. If you go up by O'Hare or Midway, they have noise ordinances. So they were trying to make sure when the airplanes took off or landed, they did not impact a larger percentage of the neighborhood.
There's a city of Chicago noise ordinance against how loud automobiles can play their music and radios. It's not enforced, but when these people drive down through your neighborhood with these big boom boxes going on, they are violating a city ordinance. What we have to do is promote the enforcement of the ordinance that's still on the books. There's a certain number of decibels that it can't be louder than. Well, if we are constantly being disturbed because of that noise, we have an obligation to see that the noise ordinances are enforced in that regard as well.
And you got zoning. Every time you try to move your church to a certain location, you try to build an addition to it, you got to deal with zoning. And you need to know the zoning commissioner. There are parking ordinances, and you go to certain neighborhoods, they have permit parking only. So you got to park 3 blocks away from the house you're visiting. And then there are building code ordinances to ensure safety. And there's certain things about, like you decide, I'm gonna build a porch. Well, you can't just erect a porch on your property unless it complies with the building code. And then there's business licensing and certain signage, it varies by community, by city, and state.
Well, and the sign ordinance can be very impactful, especially for churches when they are putting up a sign on their property even, and the sign is deemed to be in violation of the sign ordinance. That can cause some conflicts as well. So we have to be aware of some of these things and take them into consideration as we're trying to implement the purpose of the signs and the other things that we're trying to do in that regard.
Next slide. And these are just some more examples of noise and different types of resolutions and so forth. Next slide. So this is what we've discussed. You have any questions or comments? Take the slide down. Okay. No questions?
Please feel free to add any questions or comments in the chat or to raise your hand and we can provide a spotlight for you at this time.
And let's give Chloe Smith a round of applause. She is a master at doing this, sharing information. Thank you so much, Chloe.
Thank you.
Y'all can do this. Everybody is off camera. Okay, we started with Dr. James Foster, then Sabrina Petton, and then David Johnson.
Can I speak? I'm sorry.
Yes, go.
Okay. Thank you all so much. Oh, excuse the background. I'm doing some house cleaning on Saturday. Here is the thing. I know that there are several ordinances that pertain to the church that my family actually attends in Bronzeville. But honestly, how should I know these ordinances so I could ensure that we are and the parishioners are being addressed fairly, especially as we deliver the Lord's word? I mean, there's some different ideas that we have that we want to make sure that we are in accordance with the laws and the regulations that are in the area, but I don't really know how can I actually do anything if I don't really know the laws. How and where, and this may be a very remedial question.
Talk to two people. One, your alderman. You know who that is?
Yes.
Have a meeting with your alderman.
Yes.
And you're going to have regular meetings to share your vision, what you are doing, what you want to do. Are you trying to build some property? Are you trying to put a certain kind of sign up on your property? And just share with him what you're trying to do. So he then is your researcher. You pay him to look out for you.
Okay.
You're already paying him. Don't pay him no more money. Just say, I have questions about this. And then you have a county commissioner. You know who that is?
Actually, no, I do not.
You can find out who your county commissioner is. Look on your voter registration card. It will tell you what county district you live in, and then you can Google who that is.
Okay. Thank you so much.
And then make sure that you establish a connection to those people so that they will respond when you are attempting to meet with them. Many times they want to have you support them for voting purposes, but they don't deliver back the services that they should. But if they know who you are and they know that you have influence, that carries weight with them. And in reciprocating fashion, you ought to be able to get some responses back from them, at least to know what ordinances are going to be affecting your particular area. You indicate that you are one of the constituents that are concerned, and if necessary, you will gather a group of constituents to express their concern as well. I think that will help them connect with you.
One of the things you say, I have a congregation of X number of people in your ward, in your district, and we have some issues that we want you to address for us.
Okay.
Information. And they all have faith meetings, and your introduction may be at their faith leaders meeting, and then you ask questions. Don't just sit there and have them talk to you and you don't have a question. Who is next?
Thank you.
Someone else had their hand up. So, hello, who had some questions? I saw
Reverend Foster, did you have a comment?
Yeah, I have a excuse me. I have a question, Reverend Dr. Wilson, and for Brother Howard. you've been tirelessly doing this kind of work, educating us, and we really appreciate it. But I'm interested in patterns as far as over the years, participation of clergy people. Have you noticed some patterns with how are we participating more now than we did in the past? Or do you see patterns of how it changes? What would your response be? I know you're always positive. You're always educating us.
But I've noticed
what are you seeing today?
faith leaders tend to contact us when they have gotten into trouble, and they're trying to build a building, they need a zoning variance, or somebody sued the pastor or the church. And what our goal has always been to get you on the front side of legal actions and to get you informed. We do a thing, Pastor, Church, and the Law, because our church leadership, not just the pastors, our boards of trustees and boards of deacons or elders are unfamiliar with their responsibilities and how to protect the church. So we do a whole thing about bylaws, how to draft your bylaws. Because if you end up in a lawsuit, the only people that win are the lawyers and the court system. Church loses, and sometimes individuals personally lose.
And also there is this thing where the traditions of policies with respect to faith leaders and political leaders has been that the political leaders utilize the faith leaders for voting purposes, but then they don't connect back to those faith leaders except when they want votes. And so it's incumbent upon us as faith leaders to be more involved in helping the community and the church to maintain a oversight over our elected officials. It used to be that elected officials called on the church leaders to sway the community by holding press conferences, and they would invite you down to the press conference. But after the press conference is over, there's no communication about even the issue that they were holding the press conference about. So we have to do a better job of ourselves demanding the follow-up, because that's one of our big issues. We don't follow through on even the issues that we are concerned about.
Thank you.
That Dave Wallace. Dave Wallace, I can't hear you.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Jeanette. The man that just spoke wisely, and I appreciate that. I remember several years ago that politicians wanted to go to the churches to appeal for their votes and stuff. However, we had a saying at that time: no permanent friends, no permanent enemies, just permanent interests. And we didn't have to be nasty or cantankerous with the politicians. We just state these are our principles, and we need to follow them. And it doesn't involve party. It doesn't involve particular issues, but we just want to pursue the interests that represent our church, our community, our city, or whatever it may be.
I think that's very important. And for those of you who may or may not know, Dr. Dave Wallace is a graduate of CTS, but he's also a person who joined with Reverend Jackson because they were seminary together at CTS. And they built what we now call the Rainbow Push Coalition, but it started with Operation Breadbasket, as they were seminary students. And their thing, and Dave can correct me if I'm wrong, every Friday they had meetings with clergy and seminary students to look at issues and to help them begin to see their role in society. We've stopped that because well, I don't know about you, but clergy seem to be so busy that you're not connecting the dots that impact your congregation and impact you. And that's why, we've been pushing Brian to really start these seminars, because you can't be ignorant and lead people.
Yeah. Mhm.
That's just my personal opinion. Any other questions? Dave, tell them how y'all used to do the Dr. Wallace, I'm sorry, how you used to do those meetings every Friday with faith leaders.
Well, the beauty of it is that Dr. Clay Evans at Fellowship Baptist Church invited Operation Breadbasket to meet there. And you're right, there was about 40 to 50 pastors representing everything from Roman Catholic churches to Pentecostal to Methodist to CME, right on down the line. And we had a wide variety of pastors who were willing to meet together. And there was no rancor, there was no arguing, there was no controversy among us, because we were working together for the community.
I just want you to know, and those of you, Miss Betty Magnus has joined us in the office.
Because I heard Dave's voice.
She heard Dave Wallace was here. Because these are all old breadbasket people who stay from breadbasket to Operation Push to Rainbow Push. And so I just want y'all to know who she is sitting over here with. And we're in black and white today, just in case y'all didn't know.
Right.
Someone else
Thank
had
you,
a question.
Dr. Wilson.
We have another remark from Mr. David Johnson.
Okay.
Thank you, Reverend Dr. Wilson, for your man. These series have been very informational. So now I'm starting to think, when you talk about the political address, I'm saying I need to know it for my home. I need to know it for my church. I need to know it for my business. It's like I have 3 or 4 political addresses because I am bivocational and an entrepreneur in one space, and then I'm doing ministry in a different space, and I live in a third space.
Right.
I think I'm thinking about that the right way, but I feel like there's just this whole, I remember I used to study civics back in the day, and I feel like there was a whole thing that I've just lost track of that in the busyness of what I'm doing, just trying to, get a message out a week and get a check out during the week, or get a message out on the weekend and get a check during the week.
I'm going to let Betty Magnus say a few words to you, but one of the things that in all your 3 areas, many of you have multiple places. You vote at your home address.
Right.
So that's a political address, and you got to know who those people are that represent you personally. You also need to have a big on your screen at church. This is the church's political address, and ask the people what is theirs, and make them learn who represents them, because they coming to you for stuff they should be going to an alderman for, or they should be going to a county commissioner for, but they don't know. And then you have a business. Your business has a political address that will determine whether it can continue at that location, because it's zoned for business and not for residential. All of these things everybody needs to think about. And most pastors, you don't live near your church, so your political address personally is different than your church.
Yes.
This is our political director for the state of Illinois, Miss Betty Corrine Magnus. Go ahead.
I'm very happy to hear you say that you are learning your political address, because there's nothing more important than that. You need to know who the alderman is for your political address for your church. And years ago, your political address consisted of the president, the U.S. senators, your congressman. Then you went to your local and you had your state officer, state representative, the attorney general, the state treasurer, And then you went to county, and the county was all ran together. Now you have individual county commissioners, so you need to know which county commissioner is yours. And then you had the alderman and committeemen, and that was it. But now you have a judicial district. Those were set up because we were not able to vote and get blacks elected as judges because they had to all run countywide. So they created judicial districts so that way you got black and brown.
That's in Cook County. Now, if
Yeah,
you're out of the state,
judicial.
where Dave is up there in
Yeah, they're not doing that.
they don't do that in Spokane, Dave. So I'll be looking for this.
Now, this time around, they've added another one. If you live in Chicago, you're going to be able to vote for a school board member.
Right.
That's totally new. You will have a school board person running in November that you will be able to vote for, and there are gonna be hundreds of them, as based on what I saw start filing on yesterday. So you have to do your due diligence about all of these people. You need to know if this county commissioner has done anything for you, if that state rep has done anything for you. The state reps decided that we should have a judicial district so that we could get black judges elected. So you need to know what they do. You need to know that your alderman does one thing, but your committeeman does another. People go to the alderman about their garbage. They really should go to the committeeman for that. That's a party position. So to start off, all you have to do is put the address in. If you live in Chicago, go on to Chicago Board of Election, put in the address, and all of that information pops up. If you have your voter registration card, all of that is on your card. Board of Review, Cook County Commissioner, your judicial address, and this next card that you will receive will have your Chicago School District.
Now, nationally, Betty, this is a national call. Where can people go get that information? Do 1-800
our vote. 188. 866. I'm sorry.
1-866 our vote.
Our vote. 866 our vote.
Put that in the chat. Cleo, put it in the chat, please.
And they can tell you if you're registered to vote. They can tell you where you go vote if you're registered. If you're not registered, they can register you to vote when you call. It's a voter protection line. And on election day, if you're having problems and you don't want to call Rainbow Push, you can put that number in and they'll send someone out because they work directly with Lawyers for Civil Rights.
Okay, Dave Wallace gives one more last question. I don't think anybody else has.
Thank you.
Betty, is the school board election, I've been hearing that on the news about as people line up for that, will that be elected by districts or is this?
Yeah, they'll be elected by districts. No, it'll be by districts, and the mayor will appoint 10 members and 10 members will be elected by districts. This time around, next time around, there'll be more people elected because they're gonna split up the districts. It's really crazy, you know, the way the legislature did this, but we will eventually have more elected board members than appointees.
What they're trying to do is move away from mayoral control school board.
Yes.
Most of you live outside of Chicago. You already have an elected school board. You have elected library board. You have elected other commissioners. Any other questions? Ready to go?
Jeanette, may I make one comment?
Yes, sir.
While this program is going on, I am getting I'm getting appeals from my home area of people and organizations who are concerned about my vote in the state of Washington. So that's taking place right now while we're having a conversation of what's going on in the Chicago area, which I found very interesting.
Well, the conversation is civics is for all
Yeah.
of America. It's not just
Yes.
Chicago. And we're asking people that are watching, because many people will watch this on YouTube. This
Mhm.
information applies across America.
Yes, it does.
And we want faith leaders to get focused so that you can focus your members. That's why they're not voting. They get confused
Amen.
and they get
Yes.
frustrated when they go in the polls. So we want to do voter education, church by church, faith institution by faith institution, so that you can inform people. A lot of people are not voting because they don't know what to do. And you have to be able to tell them as their spiritual leader.
And if Christians registered and voted, we would really change politics in America.
Because you did it before, we have to do it now.
Right. And
Yes.
right now, there is what I would call a wrong assumption that Christians don't support issues that everyday people support, without saying who. The one side is for a whole nother thing. I don't know what Christ they're believing in, but they on a different page than what we're
Mhm.
on. And
Yes.
we have to be adamant about what we believe and what works for our people. And we cannot stray away from that. If they can't get it from their faith leaders, they're going to get it either out in the street or from somebody that does not mean anything to help them.
And this goes for Muslims, for Jews, for Christians, and others. Civics education, because all of us have a political address. All of us have a political beginning. You start with a birth certificate. All of us have a political ending, a death certificate. So all of these things are important. One of the people that we never look at is there is a coroner or medical examiner in every county. And you ought to know who that is, because people, we talked about earlier, people are killed and they are taken to the morgue. You have to know, how do you find them? How are they to be identified?
And in some areas, you vote for the coroner, depending on where you live.
Right. Certain counties. So you have to check all of these things out. Any other comments? Okay. Well, Dave, you're the senior leader on here. Pray us out.
Oh, thank you. Gracious God, our Father. Oh, Lord, you are our creator, our sustainer. But Lord, you've put work ahead of us and before us that we can't just sit around and live our lives. We've got to participate in lives. And as we do that, we share the gospel of Jesus Christ because we care for one another. And this is one, and our voting and civic work is one of the ways that we care for one another, for our neighborhoods, for our homes, for our counties, our states, for our nation. And when we leave and ignore those things, our nation declines. Lord, wake us up, call us, and let us go forth and work on your behalf. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
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 Thank you. Thanks, everyone. Thank Betty Magnus. Give her a hand, or Wade.
Yeah.
Thank you. She'll be on again.
Thank you, everyone. We will see you next week, and we will have more information for you all soon. Have a
Thank
good
you so
day.
much, and I appreciate your time and your efforts.
Thank you.
Amen. Bye now.
Leave.